Welcome to Rebuilding the Artist, a podcast that explores the intersection of identity, creativity, and mental health in the arts. I'm your host, Rashida Black, a therapist and former musician, here to help you navigate the pressures and challenges of a world that often demands perfection at the cost of well-being. This podcast is about reclaiming your sense of self between all of the expectations and harsh self-talk. Whether you're an artist or supporting a creative, join us as we explore building resilience and living authentically. Hi, thank you for being here. So I have been unpacking some boxes from my not so recent move. Don't judge me. And have you ever done this when you're supposed to be maybe doing something productive, but you get sidetracked, take a little nostalgia tour? And especially when it comes to something like journals, right? It's all good until you hit that one really cringy entry and you feel both embarrassed for your former self and also grateful for how much you've grown. Well, if you haven't, I encourage you to do that. Look back at some of those old posts. It's something, right? It shows who you've been and maybe is a testament to the work that you've put in, where you are now. It's a good thing. It doesn't always feel like a good thing, but it is a good thing. So anyway, I was reading this journal entry where I went off about Lana Del Rey, who said that she wanted to join the 27 Club. And if you don't know, the 27 Club is that group of folks who all died at age 27. So like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse. And so then I wrote in my journal, I was like, girl, you are already 2 years too late. What are you even talking about? I couldn't tell if it was just like marketing, if this was really like a cry for help. And because of that, I realize now that if I couldn't tell the difference between her artistic expression and real struggles, then no wonder I was so confused as a teenager. Like, is this what I need to do in order to be successful too? And that is what we're talking about today, because that mess right there, media loves to glamorize that stuff because, of course, it sells, right? Like issues sell, messiness sells. Those stories get attention. And unfortunately, it's also what allows the general public to generalize all artists. Like, see, I told you, or yeah, I knew it. Or worse, kind of like what I said in the first episode, it makes young artists think that that's who they have to be successful. That's what Lana was talking about, conflating attention with success. I've found it hard, and sometimes still do find it hard to tell what's authentic and what's being romanticized. And then, since I was in this journal, I documented everything. It's what it looked like, which is great, so I can, if my memory fails me, I have historic reference to what I was experiencing at that time. And I remember, just either my friends or myself trying to be that artist, wearing sunglasses indoors, speaking only in metaphors. Baby, you are not Yoda. Get it together. And it's exhausting, not only to try to maintain that perception, that persona. And if you haven't been that person, then I'm sure you know someone who has. And it's exhausting to be around that person. And we love them anyway, in doses. But the point is that what we're striving for at that time is attention. And attention is a basic human need. I kind of wondered just to what extent. Because in that old journal entry, I get the rose-tinted glasses becoming legendary. But it seemed like Lana thought that dying was the only way to achieve that status. Because again, that 27 Club all of the people who were there died. 27. And I think I also at that time, I couldn't falter that idea, right? Because as a society, we tend to kind of live fast, especially in our 20s. And unfortunately, that sometimes shortens our lives. As a musician, I tend to focus on musicians. And there's a bunch of people who died in their 20s. Lana could have died and not become the icon that she romanticized. But she made the decision to do something different, to be different. And she's been sober for like over a decade now. And I know this because I follow high profile sober people. Not literally, right? I mean, on social media, right? Because as someone in recovery, that's important to me. And so when she said that alcohol was the first love of her life, I mean, I felt that. For a lot of us, substances feel like an emotional void, especially in those teen and 20-something years when all we really want to do is belong and be accepted. But Lana didn't become the icon that she is because of her substance use. She's still here. She's still creating because she got sober. Her choice to take care of herself gave her more time to create, to grow, and to really like be legendary. So as a younger artist, I probably could have maybe learned something different about that. But also at that time, I was in my Lydia Deetz utterly alone energy. And so it was very kind of dramatic, very performative. And instead of bringing people in and connecting, I was losing them with my whole tortured artist vibe. And that's not to say it actually was a performance, right? I really tried to hide all of that. But trying to hide it made it look like I was trying to be all deep and mysterious, which I was absolutely not. I was just like every other sad person at that time, writing bad poetry in a coffee shop. Just doing what I saw, especially in media, that people my age do. Actually, now I'm kind of reminded of Basquiat, who also is in the 27 Club. And he was couch surfing and struggling to survive and eating junk food and taking drugs, and had issues with his parents and trauma and all the things. And the work that he was doing didn't change. It remained consistent. It was reflecting his memories of his past, and really like his ethnic culture kind of stood out as a signature, right? His personal aesthetic. And so his work revealed his truth. And so I can look to that as like, that's what a unique artist does. There's no pretense. And even though, I mean, I felt like it was a little bit kind of, it got exploited, but there was no hiding, no need for like smoke and mirrors to lust after notoriety or anything like that. And so I feel like a lot of the other artists in the 27 Club were doing similar things. It was commentary on the social, political, environmental issues of their time. I also get that all of this was before social media made private lives super accessible. And then public demand to see those private lives wasn't as expected at that time. And I wonder if that's what makes it harder these days. When we're thinking about like glamorizing and romanticizing, it's harder to tell what's true, what's real. But then it also, as an artist, makes it more difficult to maintain control over our lives, over our stories, right? That's what we want as creative artists. We want to have the courage to be seen, and we want those heartfelt connections with genuine people so that we can feel accepted, feel like we belong. And as artists, I feel like we don't know our power in a lot of ways. We give people permission to explore their own gifts and talents, permission to showcase their own abilities. And I feel like the artists who achieve that and who know how to retain their true self, they become legends. and not just, when or because they die. Nipsey Hussle, he was a good rapper and was legendary also because he was an effective social activist. He happened to die young. His contribution to his community enriched, let's say, his legacy. I still think that the artists who make the greatest impact are usually masters of their craft. Often to the public, and especially young artists, we glamorize illusions. We glamorize potential. We glamorize Marilyn Monroe holding down her dress, or Frida Kahlo's unapologetic presence. But we don't necessarily think about their pain, about the bravery that it takes to keep going when all you want to do is just quit, just stop. Dying does not give life meaning as much as living well does. One of those really kind of dark times when I was in college, sophomore year specifically, I wanted to drop out. I was caught up in the illusion of what college should be. And then when that reality didn't match, I just spiraled. And my mom, she fought with me to stay in school, but I was not being honest about the severity of my depression. But that's not to say that I didn't also try to get help. I remember seeing my conservatory school counselor for a few sessions, but she didn't have a background in the arts. So I didn't really feel understood or seen. So that connection didn't last. And then the school attempted to address performance anxiety by inviting like a sports psychologist to do a masterclass. Huge misfire. So I didn't necessarily get the help that I needed at the time. And none of my friends could truly understand what I was experiencing, the intersectionality of it all. So I did what I saw my idols doing, whether it was their truth or not, right? Or maybe it was just commercialized images. I don't know. But I started to glamorize because it's comforting to see someone like you. I think because I was so desperate to connect with someone who was like me, someone to validate my experiences. I was desperate for companionship. And so I didn't gravitate towards the stories of like overcoming or healing because that seems so far removed from my reality. But instead, I was drawn to like painful stories like Sylvia Plath. Oh, I glamorized her. And Billie Holiday. Later in Billie's life, she died when she was 44. So later in her life, she had just gravelly voice from smoking cigarettes, but also from poverty and racism and alcoholism and, incarceration and heroin use. I mean, there was a lot there. Her life exemplified a type of pain that most of the people in the audience had not and would never experience. It could be tourists too. It was entertainment for them. And for me, I was like, oh, you see, people just watch you self-destruct and they benefit from that. It's easy to look at legends like Billie or Basquiat and see their struggles as part of their brilliance, while forgetting that these were people who were in pain. Okay? And their art, even if it reflected or expressed the pain, was not the cause of their success. It's hard to see that because it looks like it is completely linked. And so as artists, we need audiences, yeah, but what part of them are we actually appealing to? Do you know what I mean? And then if they're paying us, right, we seem to benefit from our own destruction. How do we reverse course? Nowadays, I feel like help is more accessible, and I'm glad that young artists can reach out for support and learn that we can still be creative geniuses without all of the suffering. Because it's going to have to be the artists who say no to others capitalizing off our pain. Otherwise, we're complicit in creating these harmful messages that influence younger audiences. And I get how complex that is, especially because we're not necessarily the people in power. I felt a kind of way watching Dax Shepard, who's in recovery, playing like a pill-popping alcoholic on that show Bad Monkey. And I get that it's acting, yeah, but it's still tough to watch, watch like, I know what his personal beliefs and values are. And then he's like portraying or betraying, I don't know. But it just felt like that was a lot. And I can only imagine that he really had to do some work on his own in order to manage that discrepancy. I remember Philip Seymour Hoffman saying that his method acting style really messed with his head in ways that contributed to his relapse and affected his mental health. So even though, it kind of sounded like a shameless plug, I still feel like if every artist had a therapist on standby to help separate their real identity from maybe the characters that they're portraying, how great would that be? Can you imagine a young Miley Cyrus knowing exactly who she was and not absorbing all that pain from portraying Hannah Montana? If you haven't heard her talk about that, look it up. But my point is, how do we as artists or even audiences separate the people from the substance and the mental anguish? Every time Britney wields a knife in an Instagram post, we're like, uh-oh, let's get her some support, right? Which is necessary because we all remember that her shaved head, and it was something. Now I think it's becoming a little bit more like, let's do something collectively. We have the ability to help, or at least to not glorify someone's pain. And I think that's wonderful, and that we have to keep heading in that direction. Sometimes I think about people like Drew Barrymore or Robert Downey Jr., both of whom had very public issues throughout their youth and who are now publicly sober. Also, people like Demi Lovato, Eva Mendes, Brad Pitt, J-Lo, Adele, Eminem, okay? Also very publicly sober. Jason Bateman, David Bowie. And so anyway, their becoming sober or being in recovery didn't diminish their credits, right? Getting their minds, bodies, and spirits into alignment actually seemed to improve their careers. And so what I want you to pay attention to is how often the media tends to like gloss over the negative consequences of addiction or mental health issues so that we can all kind of collectively start moving away from that tortured artist image. It's not helpful. And I think, it becomes even more confusing when there's artists who don't seem publicly to have issues, like Snoop Dogg. I don't know if you remember, but at one point he was like, oh, I'm quitting smoking. But then he was right back to it. And if you want a little inside scoop on why that quitting didn't last, it's because withdrawing from any substance feels terrible, especially when you first stop. So most people, they want to avoid feeling terrible, right? Snoop has been like a daily smoker for decades, which I'm gonna put my clinical hat on right now. His withdrawal symptoms would have been the worst for him. Like, withdrawing from weed is increased anger, irritability, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, restlessness, depression, headache, stomachache, shakiness, right? Like, that's a lot. Who wants to deal with that? It is not attractive or appealing. But no one tells you when you start how difficult it is to stop, which is also why I think, people who are in long-term recovery are some of the most courageous, strongest people around. And I feel like since I kind of grew up listening to Snoop, that I was absolutely influenced by that. And so were all my friends. And I wish I had known when I was listening to those messages that were, essentially like glorifying self-harm. I wish I had known to question that. What is the intention right now with these lyrics? Because nowadays we have a handful of folks who are talking, especially in hip hop, talking about therapy. Kendrick Lamar comes to mind, and he didn't get canceled for it. And I feel like this is what the civil rights leaders back in the day were advocating for when hip hop was still young. Because at that time, hip hop was really about the glorification, well, let's say like late 80s, early 90s, about the glorification of like gangs and drugs and sex work and the N-word and violence and blah. And the civil rights leaders at that time knew how influential that could be. And that's not to say it didn't reflect the realities of a lot of the artists at that time, but it was being marketed, it was being misused, I'll say, and again, in order to generalize groups of people. And so then the pushback came, especially from youth, who said, no, we can separate fact from fiction. But that wasn't true for all of us. The unfortunate part is that not everybody has media literacy and the potential harm that they can cause. I still don't know who benefits from the emaciated ballerina. So then how do young artists stay connected to the world around them and also build a sense of identity that doesn't rely on pain or addiction for validation? Even if those images are a part of, your culture, because now I'm thinking about folks who identify as like goth, you can still participate without self-harm. You can still be punk without self-harm. I just feel like prioritizing our well-being and self-care while also maintaining our creativity, that's big boss energy. So then we can learn more from the stories of people like Tom Felton and Jim Carrey and Will Arnett and Tom Holland, Samuel L. Jackson, Kelly Osbourne. These are folks who have publicly gone from being victims of certain things that led them down that substance, mental illness path to regaining control over their own lives. I want to know how we stop glamorizing tragedy and start living well. Because what I know now, it sounds so corny to me. Just like try to breathe through some of those moments that I would instead turn to like alcohol and other drugs to manage for me, because I didn't believe that I could manage them on my own. They felt larger than life. And it felt like a personal failing, but it wasn't. I just didn't have the skills or the healthy community that I needed. So when I started to make that change in my life, that's what I needed to focus on. Surrounding myself with people who supported my health, my creativity, and my well-being. Whether you are a young artist, the parent of an artist, or just someone trying to get through the day, just remember, you don't need to suffer to be seen, and you don't have to allow others to exploit your suffering for their benefit. And especially to my artists listening right now, you can become a legend by figuring out how to stay true to yourself and take care of your mental health, right? It's not just about the sad story. It's about that creative journey. I wonder, what is your journey? I want to hear your stories. Okay, here's what. Email me, podcast@kimora.com. Email me with just your stories, right? Your struggles, your wins, your moments of clarity. Send me a message. Let's keep this conversation going. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to the end. I want you to take good care of yourself, and I will speak to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Rebuilding the Artist. We hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, connected, and more in tune with your creative self. Remember, this journey is about progress, not perfection. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow artists who need to hear these stories. You can also follow us on Instagram @Kimora Wellness for more insights and updates. That's Kimora Wellness, Khemura Wellness. Join us next time as we continue to explore what it means to rebuild and heal as an artist. Until then, keep creating, keep questioning, and above all, keep showing up for yourself. You are the artist. You are the storyteller of your life.